Hello, Packers fans, and welcome in to PackersNews.com Facebook Live remote edition. A little bit, we got a week off, so to speak, in the building in Green Bay. I know Ryan, you're still there, and currently jealous of my setting.
So we're talking before going on, and she's in Alabama. Great, great opportunity, obviously, Cassie, for you to visit family. And I thought you said it was 55 down there. And I'm like, oh, that's nice. That 55, that's nice. Like, no, 75. I'm like, don't talk to me. Nope, don't talk to me. It's 36 here in Green Bay today.
It was 26 when I left Green Bay the other night. I made a spur of the moment decision during the middle of the Packers Browns game. I FaceTimed my family at halftime. They were all together at my grandma's. I got really, really sad that I wasn't there. And I don't think you were next to me, Ryan. So Pete was watching me go through it. Within about 10 minutes in the third quarter, and then the fourth quarter got really exciting at the beginning. So I was like trying to keep up with the game at the same time. And every time there was a commercial break, I was back on the American Airlines site, and I bought a ticket before the end of the game. and
See, that warms my heart at least. Even if it's not warm in Green Bay, that warms my heart.
I'm glad I could do that for you. Yes. As we said, it's been a couple of days since the Packers played. They played on Christmas Day, defeated the Browns 24-22. We're going to talk about that a little bit, but if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments. We'll get to them here over the next few minutes. But before we get back into the game a little bit, Ryan, big piece of news today is the Packers had probably their biggest wave of players put on the COVID-19 list in the past couple of months. We've seen this surge going around the NFL, and really the Packers have been able to avoid it, and even still today, not as many as some other teams have had, but their biggest wave yet so far. Kind of walk us through who all was put on the COVID-19 list today.
Yeah, it was their biggest wave so far, and it comes. It's a continuation of what has been a pretty substantial wave inside this locker room. Ben Braden, offensive lineman, Amari Rodgers, receiver, return specialist, linebackers Tipa Galea and Ty Summers are all on the COVID-19 reserve list as of today, as is practice squad defensive lineman RJ McIntosh. So 5 players on the roster. And remember, Cassidy, this comes on the legs of, in the past week, MVS, Kevin King, Shamar Jean Charles, Chauncey Rivers, Ladarius Hamilton from the practice squad. 10 players in the past week. Now, these are all reserves. And so right now, if you just take this picture frame in time, they've dodged any significant starters. Obviously, MVS and Kevin King play fairly significant roles for them at times. But the question is where it goes from here. And Matt LaFleur said he's not waving a white flag against the spread of this virus. He's not going to throw up his hand and say, well, that's just the way it goes. He's not only stressed the importance of masking up, of staying socially distant, spreading out inside the facility. He said that they've considered, if anything else happens, potentially going to virtual meetings this week and just meeting on the practice field in person and doing everything else virtual. So this is a head coach that's very in tune with the issues right now that COVID-19 are presenting, and not only have presented, but could present going forward.
This seems to be something that's going to stick around for the remainder of this season, and it's going to have to be part of how you deal with your roster. Matt LaFleur has referenced several times, we're dealing with this the same way we would with injuries. How do you deal with injuries? Who do you have there depth wise? But what we have seen is that sometimes you can take out an entire position group with positive COVID-19 tests. And so that's where you get a little dicey. And can you take us down a little bit more into what Matt LaFleur was saying today about possibly bringing some players in to supplement a certain position group? Apparently, it would seem the wide receiver and or linebacker core.
Right, those would be the two. You're definitely right about the. He said that him and Brian Gutekunst have had discussions about bringing in some external reinforcements. Amari Rodgers, that's significant because I don't know who the return specialist is behind him. I mean, they don't have Randall Cobb, they don't have Malik Taylor. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure who would.
And Sullivan?
Maybe. I don't know. I really don't know.
He was really just doing punt returns. They had moved Amari Rodgers exclusively to kick I don't know who you put back there on kick return.
Yeah, I don't know what happens there.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be an area they might need to bring in a returner this week. Tipa Galea played pretty well as a reserve at a really thin position of outside linebacker. Without him, they've got 3 outside linebackers. But they're also, Ladarius Hamilton being on the COVID-19 reserve, he can't be promoted from practice squad. Tipa Galea had his first career sack. I mean, he kind of fell on top of.
I was about to say he just was
Baker
in the right place
Mayfield.
at the right time, but still.
But he has been playing well, and he did get rewarded for that play. Sometimes you get good breaks when you deserve them, and that's kind of what typically his play has deserved a break like that. So, the depth of this team, just right now, at the very least, the depth of this team is going to get tested. And again, the bigger concern is, okay, 10 players in the last week. What's next?
What's next? Exactly. And you obviously your biggest concern is that they are healthy, that they're safe. But the Minnesota Vikings have proven to be a tough out. You could afford to be missing some players a little bit more when you're facing the Lions, but that's going to be tough if they're having if this week continues on this same path. What is the roster going to look like come Sunday against the Vikings? So we will have to wait and see. A couple of questions coming in, actually several questions coming in, a ton about the defense. So let's just hop into that. Daryl asked, just wanted to comment on the lax defense and the running defense wasn't present. Brian followed up on that and asked, is the run defense a real concern or fixable? I think that's a good way of looking at it, because when you look at what they did against the first half of the season, especially mobile quarterbacks, it feels completely different than how they've played the past couple of weeks. So, Ryan, is it a concern or is
yes,
it
anytime something's not going the way you want, it's going to be concerned. The question is how big of a concern it is. And I do think, look, Nick Chubb had a lot to do with the run defense, right? I mean, Nick Chubb is a dude. He is a star in this league. And he played like one. He averaged, 7.5 yards per carry, almost 10 yards per touch. That's Nick Chubb. That's what he does. With that said, the containment on the edge needs to be better. And that is something that is absolutely fixable. It's been better earlier in this year. But I think that just that fact, that the containment on the edge needs to be better, it points to the larger issue going on in this defense right now, which is something that Matt LaFleur alluded to today. It's balancing that fine line between being aggressive in terms of making plays and playmaking and not giving up those plays, not being too aggressive so that you're giving up a lot of plays. This is a defense that did a really good job of just playing sound, fundamental football through the first half of the season. And it's made a lot of plays in the last 5 games, but it's given up a ton of plays too. And so Matt LaFleur said today, that they've got to philosophically, they've got to be able to make that balance of doing your 1/11th, as cliche as that sounds,
right,
and not doing more than that and going hunting and searching for the big plays, which is how you lose containment on the edge, because you're pinning your ears back and you're getting too much in your rush lane and trying to get the quarterback and not think about the run game, which is it's a lot less sexier than sacks, but it's still important. And then on the back end, not chasing and getting out of position with your coverage and chasing the ball and chasing picks and just playing your assignment. That's something that this defense has struggled with.
A good question here as well. What happened to the D? Why are they back to this soft coverage? Sometimes they look confused, not even ready before the snap. And there's another one down here as well that I'm going to pop up in relation to the same topic. I know we talked about this, Ryan, after the game, but if you've been able to go back and watch some of the plays, here it is from Levi. The defense needs to tighten up, relying on turnovers to bail you out. Will come back to bite them against good teams. It feels like that's what they have elected to go with. They've elected to go with a soft coverage that's almost like a zone that mixes in some man-to-man depending on who they're playing, but to go with a soft zone and rely on turnovers. How long can you get away with that?
Well, and that drives Matt LaFleur nuts too. That he has been back to reiterating a very similar, familiar refrain from last year, which is the coverage needs to be more aggressive. You've heard that over the past few weeks, and you heard it ad nauseum last season. And it was a staple of Mike Pettin. Wasn't a staple earlier in this year of Joe Barry, but it's returned. Matt LaFleur saying they need to be more aggressive with their coverage and not playing so soft. So yeah, I think there definitely is some of that. But again, I think it's also a matter of, it's a philosophical thing of when you are thinking big play, big play, big play all the time instead of assignment,
Mm-hmm.
that pulls you out of position. And you've seen more and more, especially over the last 5 games, DBs out of position and not filling their assignment. Think of the last touchdown for the Browns, right? Just not getting lined up right. Rasul Douglas having to cover way too much. That wasn't on Rasul Douglas, by the way. And guys just not fulfilling their assignments. That's got to get better.
And Brian sort of asked it a little more specifically, even, why are the corners playing so soft? Do you think that there's something to, like, the fact that Joe Barry knows that with the corners he currently has on the field, with Rasul Douglas and Darnell Savage, who finally got his interception the other day, but has been in position to make interceptions, between Savage and Rasul Douglas, is he trying to get them in position to make turnovers versus every play, if that makes sense?
I think it's more that what you're saying is kind of an offensive approach, right? Like I think it's more preventative.
Playmakers in space, so to speak.
Right. I think it's more preventative in terms of philosophy. Jerry Gray, the DB's coach, has said several times this season he'd rather make an offense get 50 yards with 10 plays than 1. He'd rather make them dink and dunk and methodically work their way down the field than give up that big play, that 50-yard bomb, because that's when that's what hurts you. What does that mean? It means soft coverage. It means playing off the line of scrimmage and not and protecting against that deep ball, so that you don't give up the 50-yard gain. So I think that it is a philosophical approach of trying to prevent the big gain. With that said, yes, they're giving up a lot of big gains anyway. So at some point, something's got to change there.
Along those same lines, Terry asked, what is the latest on Alexander? They have to make a decision by Wednesday. Yes, so the Packers have until Wednesday to decide whether or not to activate Jair Alexander full-time to the roster or to move him back to IR for the rest of the season. Ryan, what sort of sense do you get on where they're leaning? Or do you think they might do something like they did with Bakhtiari, which is activate him to the roster and then just make him inactive on game days until he's ready?
Well, Matt LaFleur was asked specifically that question today. Will Jair Alexander be activated by the deadline? And Matt LaFleur's direct quote, this is all he said, is, we'll see on Wednesday. We'll see when we get there. So have fun deciphering whatever the hell that means, right? Have fun with that. My guess is that they will activate him, and it doesn't, just like David Bakhtiari got activated for PUP, doesn't mean that he's going to go play. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that he's going to be ready to go, but it means that you don't lose him for the season. So I think they're going to give themselves an option, but Matt LaFleur was awfully non-committal.
Mm-hmm. Let's just kind of go down the line then of guys. Dennis asks, is Adams and Jones good to go? As far as we know, yes, right? Or what do you think?
Did one of the, am I forgetting an injury?
That's what I'm wondering too. I'm trying to remember. Those were big names, so I wanted to bring it up in case I missed something.
Adams has no injury, I know. I don't think Jones does either.
Right. He had one a couple weeks ago, but he's been able to work his way back. As far as we know, they're okay.
Yeah, they're fine.
Joshua, a couple of people have asked, of course, what is up with Zadarius Smith? Your guess is as good as ours.
Yeah, fine. I don't know. I don't know. Until this is a blanket statement for any thoughts about Zadarius Smith. Until you see that he's on the practice field,
right?
It does not exist. His return does not exist until
that point. Yeah, and we know he's been back in Green Bay, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Got to see him on the practice field. Until then, out of sight, out of mind.
Right. Bakhtiari was back on the practice field and then not. And so we would assume there's been some sort of setback with him. Brian asked, will he come back this year? Matt is evasive at best answering that question. You're telling me, Brian.
Yeah.
He is evasive at best.
I asked him specifically today, is there been any decision made on whether or not David Bakhtiari is going to practice this week? His direct quote, this is all he said. We've discussed that, but nothing has been decided up to this point. So have fun with that one. I have no idea if he's going to practice this week. I don't know judging on that answer, I don't know if the Packers know if he's going to practice this week. It is officially the second setback that he's had in terms of returning from this torn ACL. It's a setback. How big of a setback is the question?
Randy asked about Alexander, who we addressed, and MVS. MVS, timeline-wise, should be back this week, we would think, correct? Unless he's, really, really sick.
Should be.
But timeline-wise.
Alexander, again, we've already talked. Yeah, but MVS, I would expect him to be back.
Yes. And then facing Minnesota Vikings, based on the last game, seems like you're almost going to have to outscore them. So a good question from Levi back to the defensive side. How do they cover Jefferson this time? You can't let him run wild, but you can't let Cook either if he plays. I feel like if we asked Matt LaFleur, he would say, well, that's the challenge.
Yeah. He's really, really good. Kind of a Nick Chubb type thing, you're not going to stop Nick Chubb. He's going to get yards. Mm-hmm. You're not stopping Justin Jefferson. He's going to get yards. What you don't want is for him to have 100 in the first quarter again. Like, you got to actually put up some resistance. And I do think that there's something to be said about challenging a guy at the line of scrimmage and playing a safety over top. Give him a little bit of the Devontae Adams treatment, right? See if they can do that more, because he had a lot of free, clean releases in Minnesota. He had a lot of space to roam in that secondary, and you can't make it easy on him. You got to put up some resistance. So I think you're going to see more of that. Now the question is, exactly as Levi's saying, like, how do you do that and balance the Dalvin Cook? Because Dalvin Cook has eaten up this defense historically at times, and that can happen again. So if you put more attention and focus on Justin Jefferson, you're taking it away from the box. But I still think that you can't let the guy do what he did last time. I think you're going to see more attention paid to Justin Jefferson this week.
Brian asked, is Dalvin Cook even going to be eligible? According to what Mike Zimmer said today, he expects to have him for Sunday Night Football. So we're just sort of operating off of that update. That could change. A couple of questions in here, I guess, in relation to our Amari Rodgers. Although I really liked this one up here. Where did it go? Here it is from Todd. I wasn't yelling at special teams last week. That's good. I think we said that on our podcast. The special teams didn't suck, and that's a positive. That's where the bar is currently set right now.
I love the way that our columnist Pete Doherty put it a couple weeks ago in a column, which was, it's basically like being a physician, right, or a surgeon. Your first rule is do no harm. That's what you're really trying to accomplish as a special teams unit, is to not screw things up, to not do any harm. And that if you have eyes, you've seen this season, they've done a lot of harm. There's been nothing but harm some weeks.
Right.
There was no harm on Saturday. It was harmless. And so a deep sigh of relief. They didn't, they didn't cut an artery or something. And that's a step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Gary said, are they Packers looking for a returner for receiving punts and kickoffs? And then Todd adds as well, get Winfrey back there to return punts. He's a receiver. He should be able to catch the ball. Didn't he drop his only pass on Saturday?
It wasn't a drop. It was a pretty well underthrown ball that he had to come back on. It would have been a really tough catch. But if you're talking about the one that got challenged. But
yes, that one.
I don't know. I haven't looked at it yet. They're going to find someone. It might be external. I don't know who's going to be the returner. I do not know.
And Rich asked, again, sort of along the same line with Amari Rodgers, who is the best to run the jet sweeps right now? They did it the other day. Who did they do it with? Lazard?
EQ and Lazard.
Yeah. I know they've done it with EQ.
They do it with. It hasn't been Amari Rodgers even when Amari Rodgers is healthy. That role that you thought he was getting drafted in the third round for, he's never taken it. So they've gone with Allen Lazard, who is kind of in some ways like a hybrid tight end. And then Equanimeous St. Brown, who the Browns, there must be, the book is out if EQ is on the field. Watch out for the end around, because they snuffed that out real quick and they dropped him for like 3-yard loss. So
That's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah.
yeah, that's
You need
that's
to put
the
him
that's
away.
the two guys that have been filling that role.
Gary asks, is Cobb practicing yet? We've seen him out there, albeit mostly in the pit, working on his own and with trainers, but he has at least been in the practice building. So that's step forward in the right direction. Levi says, call up Tyler Irvin. At this point, they might put you and I out there, Ryan. Um, this is a good point from Joshua, and someone else had brought this up as well with Bakhtiari. Joshua says we have 3 players getting paid and ain't even playing. Um, so they're trying to figure out what we really need to do to get the salary cap down for Adams and Rodgers, Zadarius Smith, Jair Alexander, and Kevin King. There was another really good question up here. Let me see if I can go back and find it. Yes. Revis asked, is this why it's bad to, it got broken up into 2 comments, but she said, is this why it's bad to pay huge contracts to offensive linemen? And is talking about Bakhtiari. Ryan, our colleague Tom Silverstein did the math the other day. David Bakhtiari is very, very good at what he does. He's arguably one of the best at the position. So you want to pay him, but the starting 5 currently for the Packers, their entire combined salary is less than half of David Bakhtiari's total salary. That sounds insane when you see that on paper, does it not?
That's the reality of all pro left tackles, right? They get a lot of money. Yeah,
Is it worth it to pay him that? I guess is the question.
you invent a time machine and go back and know that he's going to have a torn ACL that costs him an entire season. I'm sure it would have impacted his salary. Unfortunately for the Packers, fortunately, very fortunately for David Bakhtiari, they did not have such time machine. And at the time, yeah, he's an all-pro left tackle. It was a no-brainer decision at the time to give David Bakhtiari a historic contract because he was the best pass blocker in the NFL. All-pro at left tackle, at blindside. I mean, that those guys are worth their weight in gold. So yes, it made all the sense to do that at the time. It's turned out really not the way that the team or the player would have liked with the injury and not being able to get back on the field this year, which, you remember back in training camp, there was thought like, could he be off the PUP by week 1?
Right.
It's been about the worst case scenario that you could expect in terms of a timeline standpoint. So, at the time it made all the sense. At one point, though, on Tyler Irvin, I did look up. He is available. Tyler Irvin is available out there. He's only 28 too, so I don't know. Maybe if you're thinking outside the box, maybe that's the guy that they bring in. They sure wouldn't mind getting what they got a couple years ago from Tyler Irvin late in the season. So I do wonder. I mean, a guy like that could be on the radar.
I was just looking up to see when he last even played. I covered the Jags before I came here, and they signed a guy specifically to be their return guy, Jamal Agnew, and he changed a couple of games for them.
That's what Tyler Irvin did. Yeah, I mean, he came in 2019, and the Packers had negative punt return yardage on the season through 12 games, and he came in and got him like 100 yards and close to 100 yards in 4 games, and really turned it around. A historic punt return for all the wrong reasons. So maybe
so
I don't I have no idea what kind of football shape he is in. But
yeah, he hasn't played since the Packers put him on IR towards the end of last season.
Yeah.
So, if he's smart, especially with COVID, he would have kept himself in shape. So we'll see.
He's young enough.
Yeah. A couple of questions about Josh specifically leaving the game on Saturday. Is he doing okay? Someone up, I believe up above had asked as well, is he going to be okay? Is he good to go this week? Do we know anything new on Josh Nijman?
No, that would have been a good question for Matt LaFleur. I don't know why he left the game, but he came back and returned. So there's nothing to really be concerned about there.
Mm-hmm. And back to Bakhtiari as well, at this point, it almost feels like you're just hoping to get him back for the postseason, that's the best hope you've got right now. And with that in mind, there was a question in here. Here it is from Rick. Should the Packers play their starters on the last game of the season against Detroit? If the number 1 seed's locked up, do you see them sitting most of their guys against Detroit?
I would rest Aaron Rodgers' toe. If
for
you got
sure.
a guy playing through pain and there's nothing at all to be gained or lost by the outcome of the game, and it's just one extra week, so I don't know if that throws
Mhm.
your rhythm off that much. I would rest Aaron Rodgers' toe.
Yeah. And there was a question in here as well that I really liked. Why can't the Packers equipment staff put a toe guard on Rodgers' playing shoes? I would assume they've got something worked up.
Well, even more than that, they're shooting it numb before every game, so
Yes.
they're doing stuff.
Yeah.
He said he can't even feel it, but then obviously gets stepped on and he's hopping around mad. So, um, yeah, I don't know. Being on, I'm not an equipment expert, so I don't know the answer there. I wonder if being on the outside of the foot, if that's hard to cover up,
Hmm.
if it's the middle toe or something, if that's easier in terms of a toe guard, but I don't know.
Yeah. Mark asked about Josh Meyer's status, sort of like Randall Cobb. We've seen him in the practice building, just off to the side. Levi asked about any Billy Turner updates. Not there hasn't been much lately. We haven't really seen him as much.
Let me get you the quotes from Matt LaFleur on both those guys. He says of Billy Turner that Billy Turner is working through everything. He's missed 2 games, and um, Matt LaFleur said we'll see when he gets Wednesday or Thursday. No idea. He's working through everything.
Hmm.
Um, Josh Meyers, he said that there's a chance that Josh Meyers could come back from IR, but he gave absolutely zero indication as far as a timeline for when that might happen.
Hmm. We're going to take a couple more questions here before we sign off. So go ahead and drop them in the chat if you've got any. Joven asked updates on Jair Alexander. Joven, if you go back and watch sort of the middle part of this video, you'll see us talk about Jair. Randy asked about Cobb, same thing. Go back and we kind of, gave a little bit of an update on Randall Cobb a few minutes ago. So you can go back and see that. A good one from Gary, I guess, in relation to also the jet sweeps. Why don't the Packers use reverses? Is it just a matter of personnel that you think, Ryan? It feels like that would be a
They've
staple in Matt LaFleur's offense, just based on knowing the tree he came out of.
they've used some, but when and they used some on Saturday. But when you're looking at Alan Lazard and Equanimous St. Brown, big, tall, rangy receivers doing said reverses, gives you an idea that the personnel might not be ideal. This is the young Randall Cobbs. They are not. So I think it's a personnel thing.
Yeah. Levi asked, with Lucas Patrick, do they even need Josh Myers?
Yes.
Decent
Lucas
question.
Patrick's been tremendous as a gritty guard playing center. He's not a second round center.
Hmm. Yeah, fair enough. Good one from Mark in relation to what it's going to take with the Vikings. Do you need more than 5 to stop the run? Does that wreck the scheme to bring a safety down? It feels like they did that a little bit against the Ravens. I was trying to think of who they did that they did that a little bit against the Ravens. Can that be something that works against the Vikings as well?
Yeah, what's funny is schematically the scheme with a 5-man front and either one or two backers off the ball worked pretty well against the run for the first half of the year, and it's been less obviously lately, less successful lately. I think that the biggest issue, though, it's not scheme, it's execution. It's
Hmm.
making sure that you contain the edge and
Hmm.
not let guys get outside the edge. When you do that, especially against a Nick Chubb, but really any NFL running back, you're asking for pain.
Hmm.
And that the run defense is hurt because of that. They've got it. They've got to again. They got to straddle that line of making big plays, but not getting out of position to do so.
Yeah, and we saw that when it was done correctly, work against the Browns. I think on Tipa's sack, they only sent 4, and he was not one of them. But when they sent 4, it pushed Baker Mayfield out of the pocket, and Tipa came up and was able to get the quote unquote sack. But he was still there in the right place, right time. He contained him, so it counted. And Riva asked, "Why are they so secretive in player updates on injuries? Gamesmanship? I mean, that would be my best guess."
Competitive advantage.
Yeah.
That's what it is for sure.
Yeah. Callum asked, can we trust Jordan Love to start against the Lions if it comes to that?
Um, I I if Jordan Love plays against the Lions, it's because the outcome doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a trust thing at that point. It's a developmental thing. If there is anything to be gained or lost from that finale, Aaron Rodgers will be on the field.
Yeah. We're going to take one final one here, and I know there was a ton. Thank y'all so much for some great questions today. We'll be doing this again later in the week. But one final one here from Matthew. Is this team the best that we have, or can they be better? It's a great
Well, they can
question
be
for
better.
ready for the postseason.
I think the reality is that they're 12-3, best record of the NFL, without really playing all that complete. Start with the special teams. That's been a dumpster fire most weeks. The defense the last 5 games, not good. It's had its moments, but playmaking has played well enough to win, but it hasn't been what it was early in the season. The offense, 21 points in the first half, only 3 in the second half, and unable to put away the game. As much as the defense gave up big plays and struggled against the Browns when it wasn't intercepting the ball and sacking Baker Mayfield, the offense was just as culpable as anyone for not putting the game away. There's a lot of room for this team to improve. Part of that might come if they get David Bakhtiari and Jair Alexander back, but there is a lot of room for this team to improve even without, by just playing more sound and not giving up the big plays and being more consistent, being more opportunistic situationally in the red zone. There's at third down defensively. There's a lot of room for this team to play better.
And if you think about it, if that's the case, that could be a really, really scary team come postseason, especially with home field advantage. So whatever happens, we will be there to cover it for you all. Ryan, thanks for hopping on and staring longingly at my 75-degree weather in the background.
Looks so warm. Are you sweating at all? Or you're
I'm not
good?
sweating, but I'm definitely in a t-shirt. The wind's blowing. I'm actually a little chilly.
It's a sweats day for me. I have the sweats on.
I am looking forward to getting back to Green Bay, though, even if I have to bundle up and reacclimate myself to the weather. But yeah, it was nice to be able to get down here and slip away for Christmas to see my family for a couple of days. But we will be back with you on Wednesday, as will we'll be talking to Aaron Rodgers on Wednesday, Matt LaFleur again, as the Packers get ready to take on the Minnesota Vikings for the second time this season. Stick with PackersNews.com for complete coverage as the Packers get ready to take on the Vikings. Thanks so much, guys. Thanks, Ryan.
Awesome.